In this video, I'm going to introduce the topic of solving quadratic equations. And I put stars here and NB because this is really important, not only for higher level maths, but for ordinary level maths as well. Quadratic equations come up so often in maths in the junior cert and in the leaving cert that this is such an important skill. You must try and get your head around it and learn the skill of solving quadratic equations. Now, what are quadratic equations, first of all? Well, the word quadratic will mean that there's, like we had in quadratic patterns, it'll have something squared in it. It'll have an x squared. So when an equation has x squareds as the highest powers, an equation means it has an equals in it. So if you've got an equation with an equals that has an x squared in it and nothing higher than an x squared, chances are it's a quadratic equation. Here are some examples of quadratic equations. They might say something like solve, and they've x squared equals 9 here. So they want us to find out what x number, when you square it, gives you 9. And this is another one. You got x squared minus x minus 6 equals 0. Okay, and this one, again, they want you to find out a possible number that can be put in for an x. So when you square it and take away the x and then take away 6, you get 0. And this is another one, 5x squared plus 15x equals 0. Again, you're looking for any numbers that can sub into this that make this equal to 0. And here is another one, 4x squared minus 2x minus 1 equals 0. What all of these have in common is they've got two things in common. First thing is they are all equations because they're equal to something. Equal to 9, equal to 0, equal to 0, equal to 0. They all have an equal sign in it, so that makes them an equation. The second thing they all have in common is every single one of them has x squareds. X squared is 9, x squared here, there's an x squared here, and an x squared here. So the highest power of the x is x squared, and that's what makes it quadratic. What does it mean to solve a quadratic equation? What does it even mean to solve a quadratic equation? Well, for example, you could be asked to solve this one. Solve x squared plus x minus 6 equals 0. What does it mean to solve it? Well, we've already said that quadratic equations usually have two possible answers. And these answers, I'm going to tell you now, are called roots. We're looking for the possible roots of the equation. That roots are numbers that when you sub them into the equation, make the equation true. So, for the example I just mentioned, x squared plus x minus 6 equals 0. And if we were asked to solve this equation, we're looking for what x would have to be equal to make this equation true. The roots of this one turn out to be x equals minus 3 is one possible answer, or one possible root, and the other one is x equals 2. So there's two possible answers here. If you were to sub the number 2 into this equation, you would get 0. And if you sub minus 3 into the same equation, you would also get 0. So it has two roots. This one has two roots. These two numbers are the only numbers that satisfy the equation. Now, satisfy the equation just means when you sub these two numbers into this equation, they make the equation true. I'll demonstrate this now. If I start with the 2 first of all, let's see if 2 works. 2 works. So instead of x squared plus x minus 6 equals 0, I'm going to put an empty bracket squared plus an empty bracket minus 6 equals 0. And I'm going to try putting in the number 2. I'm going to test this solution. If I put a 2 in here and a 2 in here instead of the x's, let's see if it works out. 2 squared would be 4. Plus 2 is 2 minus 6 equals 0. 4 plus 2 is 6. And 6 take away 6 is 0. So you can see that this is true. So the equation is satisfied. If I try the minus 3, just to show you that minus 3 also works. If I do the same thing and put an empty bracket squared plus an empty bracket minus 6 equals 0. But this time I sub in the minus 3 solution. Look what happens. Minus 3 in a bracket squared, well, a minus gets squared as well, so minus by minus is a plus, and 3 squared is 9. So this thing becomes a 9. Here we've no square, but a plus multiplied by minus is a minus 3. And then we got a minus 6. And if I get my minuses together, minus 3, minus 6, of course, when you add them, it's minus 9. And 9 take away 9 is 0. So this one is also true. So we've just proven that these numbers do indeed work for this equation. Can I just show you if we picked a random number like x equals 1 and see if that works? If we put in an empty bracket squared plus an empty bracket minus 6 equals 0. If we try putting 1 into this equation, let's see what happens. 1 squared is 1, plus 1, minus 6 equals 0. 1 and 1 is 2, minus 6 is 0. And 2 minus 6 is minus 4 equals 0. And this is false. So if you were to try any other number, it'll always work out to be false. The only numbers that make this equation true are the original roots that I told you earlier on, minus 3 and 2. Now, how was I able to solve this equation? When I give you an equation like this, how can you come up with the two answers like this? Well, that's what I'm going to teach you over the coming videos. It's called solving a quadratic equation.